for less serious failures, whatever those allegations would be.
Institutions.
In recent history in
Others
Southern
act on their
California,
own. Others act on their own. And those who act on their own, they have been in conflict with the United States over the past 2 years. In fact, they have been requesting all foreign troops to leave Iraq, including the U.S. and Western troops, as a prerequisite for them to stop their hostilities with the United States.
Mahmoud Abdul-Wahab bringing us up to date there from Baghdad. Mahmoud, thank you very much.
She takes these crimes very seriously. I don't want to speak for her ahead of time as to the types of charges she's going to bring on these various violations. And you're right, they can speed and distance. Of curfew onto even more serious, violent actions or actions involving theft. So I can tell you, having spoken to Ms. Felstein Soto, that she and her office will be taking these violations very seriously. I don't think we have a precedent that was set in prior protests. I will tell you from the district attorney's office, which didn't bring charges in connection with the prior protests, starting today, you've heard we are bringing these charges, felony charges. We consider the actions, particularly the actions against law enforcement, the actions against public safety, the actions defacing, as Chief McDonald said, historic buildings, extremely serious. In many ways, I've been, well, not in many ways, I've been a lifelong Angelino. I've been here over 60 years in this city and in this county. These people who want to go ahead and not protest and not engage in legitimate speech, but want to go ahead and commit crimes in our home, we're going to protect our home. We're going to make sure if someone wants to throw cinder blocks at our police officers, we're going to protect our police officers and hold those people accountable. They want to go ahead and write disgusting words all over our public buildings, we're going to go after them as well. They want to steal from our stores, we're going to hold them accountable for their actions. And that's the way I view it. That's the way the district attorney's office views it. If you want to come into our county, into our home, and commit crimes, you will be arrested, prosecuted, and punished.
Two questions, if I may. The first one being, all three of you have spoken in some regard about outside agitators or anarchists, I've heard. Obviously, you also respect the rights of peaceful protesters. I'm wondering if you can provide any evidence of maybe organization from anarchists. Have you been able to trace a certain group that's behind it? Obviously, you've highlighted 5 cases of men and women doing destruction, but is there any other evidence about anarchists or people that are coming in here with organized intention?
I'm limited in what I can respond to that, only because there's ongoing cases, but I can assure you that all of us up here are looking to see if there is a conspiracy of some kind, organization. There is some evidence we've seen that I don't want to share at this time, and it's not because I don't want to talk to you about it. It's because we're focused on arresting those individuals involved and bringing the best cases forward. Some of them may be to the district attorney, but highly likely to the U.S. attorney, where we're working with some of our federal partners to look at that angle of exactly what you're asking for.
Then a quick follow-up for the chief. And this is coming from somebody who's been here for several days and have watched how your law enforcement officers have conducted themselves and have used less lethal rounds, from my perspective, only after being agitated by other people throwing things. However, there is a video now circulating online of less lethal methods being used on a woman, not quite a protester, standing very close to officers, being fired at with less lethal methods. Also a caveat that we do see these police officers give her multiple warnings, but I'm wondering if you can comment on the use of those methods at such a close distance as someone that did not seem to be posing much of a threat.
Yeah, you know, I can't speak to that individual case because I'm not aware of what the follow-up was. But each one of these we see, it generates an investigative follow-up. We will look into it thoroughly and then, you know, look for all the video we possibly can out there, body-worn video on the officers, and then a video from the environment there and put together as best we can what the circumstances were.
Perhaps then you could speak to people out there who may not understand that a warning's a warning, or
Yeah.
that maybe officers would take that step.
Yeah, thank you for that. The bottom line is once we give a dispersal order, it's because things have gotten out of hand and we're trying to restore order, and you are ordered to leave that area, and the officers are going to clear that area. And some of the tactics used involve less lethal munitions. And certainly, while they're way more accurate than they were in years past, certainly there's also times where they potentially hit a target that was not the intended target. So if you're in the environment and you're told to leave, please leave, because for your own safety and the safety of everyone around you.
Do you know what's going on in Boyle Heights? I just saw a video when I was leaving my office to get over here. There was a white car and then two silver cars. I think it was an SUV and a silver truck. Came up, caught off the white car, and two people hopped out. I mean, they looked, like they were, I couldn't tell if they were feds or local officers.
Right.
And then they detained that driver. Any idea what's...
Yeah, I've heard about that too. I haven't been able to find out more about it at this time. I know that Hollenbeck units were dispatched to that, so once we free up here, we'll figure out what was going on out there more.
Chief, and just to kind of follow up on that question, just trying to understand, does that mean that you guys have begun use of force reviews on some of these incidents?
Oh yeah, whenever anything happens of significance, we start looking at it right away, try and capture all the video we can, any other evidence we can right away.
We're going to take a couple more questions.
There's one particular question I wanted to ask. There was an arrest of Luz Aguilar. I believe she's an aide to one of our council members. I was wondering if there was any information regarding that arrest, if there were any charges that were posted for her and her sister, Antonia Aguilar.
Was it when you talked about? No. Yeah, no, I'll have to follow up with you to see what those, if there were charges filed or not on that one.
Maybe if the sheriff could just clarify what he had said earlier to the question about the National Guard now being given authorization to detain people. How would it work then, I suppose, and it sounded like from the previous answer you were saying they're only really there to detain those that are causing harm to federal officers, but I don't know, how would a handoff work to local law enforcement if the National Guard was to detain, say, a protester?
Let me clarify that. What's been communicated to me thus far, and we are asking for more specific communication from the Army, which the National Guard is falling under them now, along with the Marines, is that they've expressed to us that they have their mission is split up into 3 areas. That it is to protect federal functions, to protect federal facilities, and to protect federal personnel. And as far as I know, and again, we are all in meetings trying to increase our communication and coordination with them. So we're still asking for specific clarification. My understanding at this point is that they do not have the powers to arrest or detain. So if they are out in the field, they may be there, but they're working in conjunction with federal authorities. It could be ICE, Border Patrol. There's a whole host of acronym federal agencies that they're working with. But again, not knowing that specific incident, that's where communication and coordination is critical.
Sheriff, do you know, are the Marines here? I've been hearing since Sunday they've been on their way. And what are we, Wednesday?
I would be guessing if I try to answer that. Again, I'm just going to leave it at this. We are doing everything we can. I know Chief McDonald and I and our staffs are doing everything we can to improve our communication with the Army, so we would know those specific questions. And they were just activated, I think, what was it, Sunday? So there's a lot going on behind the scenes. And first of all, I just tell you, I've never served in the military. I have nothing but respect for people in the military, whether they're soldiers in the National Guard or Marines. They are our soldiers. So we're doing our best to put them and ourselves, and primarily our community, in a position so that we succeed together moving forward. because frankly, we're all in an extremely difficult situation right now that none of us have ever been involved in, including the military.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Assistant District Attorney.
And we'll continue to follow the top headlines from around the country and around the world here on Live Now from Fox. I'm Andy Mack. We're back after this.
In the meantime, let's bring into the conversation now our colleague and friend there, national security analyst and expert and retired Marine intelligence officer, Hal Kemper. He joins me. Hal, thanks for being with us. I know you're traveling, but we had to get you on for a second night in a row here as we continue to look at these live images there in downtown Los Angeles. Hal, we have to acknowledge this. I'm sure you've acknowledged it. The Marines not on ground yet. What do you make of that?
Well, what I understand is they're just outside of Los Angeles. They're undergoing training and preparation in order to go into the city. I don't read too much into it other than it's the planning process. You know, the National Guard gets training in civil disturbance on a regular basis. It's something they do. Usually they do it in state active duty status, working under the governor. In that regard, they are not held under posse comitatus, that federal law that says the military can't do law enforcement. In this case, they're federalized. Doesn't mean they didn't get the training in civil disturbance. Marines, on the other hand, this is an unusual training set, if you will. It's not that Marines have not been trained in civil disturbance. I know for a fact Marines have been trained in this many times, and they've been trained it for here in the U.S. and overseas. But it's just not part of the regular training curriculum. So what they did is they brought them in. I think part of it, too, is there's a lot of forces that have been brought in under this Task Force 51 to go into Los Angeles. And I'm seeing the normal sort of organizational issues of getting forces deployed to certain areas and set up and self-sustainable and all the other things that go with that. So I think there's kind of a deliberate process here of movement onward to wherever they got to go. And so they're staged right outside of LA, but they could come in rather quickly. One thing I would say is I haven't seen the protests spark up in such a way that there's an exigent need to put them in sooner. And I think that's something that has to be taken into consideration.
So this was posted about under an hour ago. That, according to the LAPD, the Central Division there, 3 separate demonstrations occurring at this hour. And they say to expect delays at some of these intersections and street corners here. You see there Temple and First Street, Temple and Aliso, and First Street from Main Street there. They say about 150 people on bicycles riding westbound. Haven't necessarily seen that throughout this. We've seen them on scooters and the like, but also LA County Sheriff saying this: to avoid protest area, that a demonstration is underway in downtown Los Angeles, saying to please avoid the area due to heavy traffic and potential delays, saying use alternate routes and stay updated via official sources. So, Hal, I think this is kind of a bare bones question here, if you can help us, because I've been having trouble with distinguishing who these law enforcement entities are with respect to their uniforms, what they wear, the badges on their shoulders, and the like here. So who are these? What jurisdiction are these individuals from?
I'm trying to make it out right now. I will tell you that LAPD is out there. LA County Sheriff's is out there. They are bringing in other jurisdictions under mutual aid out there as well. A lot of these other jurisdictions, and these might be, I'm taking a look here, it looks like those are National Guard, I believe.
The shield that they're holding says California National Guard.
Yeah, so they're National Guard. But there are, but some of them in the back are clearly not. They're probably local police department. I would mention this is part of an ongoing discussion that's been going back for 30 or 40 years, which is the militarization of law enforcement, where they have units that wear, you know, what look like military uniforms. They wear helmets. They've got body armor, everything. And from a distance, many times it's very difficult to see whether they are actually military or law enforcement, particularly in this situation, because we actually have military in these areas. And I have heard it misreported at times that they thought there was military that was in direct contact or doing stuff with the protesters. In actuality, it was law enforcement that was dressed up in what appears to be, you know, military or paramilitary uniforms that are part of their usually special enforcement or their SWAT type presence. So, though, you know, that you saw right there was with the California National Guard. Those are California National Guard, albeit they are in federalized status. What I would point out that's interesting is the shields say California National Guard. Normally, when they're doing a mission like this, they would be in state status.
Okay.
And that's why they would distinguish the fact that they are California National Guard, kind of showing that state status, working for the governor, where they are not fall under posse comitatus rules against law enforcement. However, those are the only shields they got. So sure. Even though they got federalized, those are the shields they have.
So Hal, I've seen photos, and maybe we can put some of them up on X, from Homeland Security, the U.S. Attorney's Office in Los Angeles, that the National Guard that was federalized, the California National Guard, has been used to protect federal employees, i.e. ICE agents, from carrying out raids. We've seen that. That's been documented in photographs. We also have seen the National Guard protect federal buildings, like in downtown Los Angeles. We've seen that. That's what we're seeing right now. Does the federalized National Guard have the power to detain protesters, Hal?
Yes, they do. That's one of those things. Posse comitatus is a really small body of law. It's like one very small paragraph, a couple of key sentences. What they can't do is they can't arrest the protesters. However, and this has happened many, many times, they're out there doing security stuff. Protesters get in their face. They pose a threat, whatever. What can they do? Well, obviously, they can respond with force. But the other thing they can do is they can detain. Now, they can't arrest, and they need to move them into law enforcement custody as quickly as possible whenever they do that. I don't know if there's a hard and fast rule on how long they can detain them. I don't recall there being anything statutorily that says it has to be X number of minutes or hours or whatever. But they can detain them. They just can't do anything that would be done by a sworn peace officer in terms of arresting them or anything like that. But they can detain them on site, and that will happen as you have federal troops protecting ICE agents doing these raids, which we had talked about when this whole thing kicked off, that appeared to be a mission that they were going to be doing, that they would be detaining people. And
so this is what I'm talking about, Hal, this photo right here of a National Guard member on hand while an ICE arrest is happening. So you're saying that that's not all too unusual?
No, that's not. Well, the whole thing is a little bit unusual, but yeah, that is actually a mission that would be normally expected, and there are rules of force and procedures that they have to go through in terms of detaining. But what you're seeing there is law enforcement actually arresting the individual. The federal troop is providing security. Now, the federal troop, if there wasn't law enforcement there and they were providing security, they could potentially detain them. I think within that, they could probably even, there's certain things they could do to restrain them if they were unruly or violent or something like that, like maybe put on flex cuffs or something. And that would be perfectly permissible. What they can't do is they can't put them under arrest. They can't read them the rights. They can't do any of that. They can't book them or do any of the things that a sworn law enforcement officer or a law enforcement officer would do in that regard.
Okay.
And so that's the limitation right now. Now, if President Trump was to impose the Insurrection Act, that would change the situation. But he has not done that. He certainly made noise, or I should say, put out rhetoric that indicates he's very clearly considering that at some point.
Yeah.
But he has not done that.
All right, Al, let's talk about the curfew in place. It'll be in place now tonight for a second night, starting at 8 p.m. local time. Do curfews work? I know you've been around crowd control, and so you are a really good resource with respect to that. When it went into effect last night, there was some type of, grace period, but it eventually seemingly worked here. Will it work a second night? Do curfews work? That's my question.
Curfews tend to work. In fact, curfews are, we use them all over the world. We had curfews when we went to Iraq. There were curfews. Curfews work. And what curfews really do is they say they get any potential threat, if you will, off the streets. Or if they are on the streets during a curfew, then they've clearly identified themselves as someone who has first decided to violate the curfew. Does that mean they're an active threat? Well, it does mean that they can be detained, that they can be stopped, and there are certain, conditions that you have that you wouldn't have if it was just a regular day and people were out on the streets. So you're saying, look, you cannot be in this area at this period of time. And if somebody is in that area, it is understood that they will be taken into custody or detained or something like that. Okay. So it kind of clears action, if you will. It really, it helps law enforcement across the board basically control an area in a way that they couldn't control it if there wasn't a curfew in place.
So if the clock strikes 8:01 in Los Angeles tonight, and there are protesters still out there liable to be arrested, to be detained, that's what you're saying?
They could be. They could be. I'm sure they just go up and they say, hey, it's 8:01. You need to get out of here. And sometimes, honestly, the protesters are out there and, they're kind of making a statement stuff, but they don't all want to go to jail. They don't all want to get detained. I mean, there are some that want to make a statement and get arrested and things like that. But for the most part, usually, depending on the tempo of what's going on and the fervor of the crowd, that usually around that transition period, they'll move out there. We certainly saw this in previous protests where it got to the time where they were supposed to get off the streets and it was clearly communicated to them, hey, it's time to go. You got to clear this area.
Okay.
And normally they will, not always, but I will say this, if they start wantonly violating their curfew, if they are out there doing vandalism and violence and stuff after the curfew, well, that's a dangerous shift in the situation. And honestly, that's something that President Trump might cite in his decision-making process.
I want to put up this post by our colleague at Fox 11, reporter Matthew Seedorf, saying this: more than 220 people were arrested in downtown Los Angeles Tuesday. That's yesterday. This includes a person accused of pointing a laser at an LAPD helicopter, one assault with a deadly weapon on a police officer, and 3 people illegally in possession of firearms. Hal, what do you make of that? 3 people who were detained, who were arrested, they had guns on them during this protest. How does that happen?
All 3 of the things that they pointed out there are very serious. Obviously, The firearms jumps out, but I would say assault with a deadly weapon. Look, a brick can be a very deadly weapon. a metal pole can be a deadly weapon. Incredible mayhem can be caused by that. But I want to point out one that doesn't get enough attention. That laser at a helicopter, that right there is a felony. If they laze a helicopter, they can dazzle, which means blind or temporarily blind the pilots in a helicopter. You could imagine the potential hazard that poses if the pilots of the helicopter can't see when they're flying in an urban area with tall buildings trying to do stuff. That is a very serious crime, and so all three of those things are very serious crimes, and hopefully putting that out there will quell that kind of stuff. But it also says another thing too. They're looking actively, and they should be. They're looking actively to find out if anybody in the crowd is carrying a firearm, and it's good that they were able to do that. Yeah. And hopefully that will deter anyone else from doing something really as dangerous and just plainly stupid as going to a protest with a firearm.
So, Hal, I'm not entirely sure if this next question is the right question to ask you, but I'm going to ask it anyway because it's becoming a frequent topic of conversation, especially on Capitol Hill, from Republican lawmakers especially, whether or not these protests are so organized that they are paid for by certain activist groups here. In what you have seen with regard to the formulation of the protests, do you think they're decentralized or centralized? Is there a top leadership chart in the organization all the way on down, or no, is it more organic than what we're seeing? What say you on that question?
That's actually a very good question, and I understand the FBI is actually actively investigating that to find that out. I'm going to say one thing about protests, and we've seen this, we saw this going back some years back with Antifa, for example, would be out there protesting, and it would look like a spontaneous protest. But when you start looking at various different protests, you started to see the same individuals show up in different locations, and it looked like they were doing things like command and control. So there are those out there who are, dare I say, professional protesters, in some cases professional rioters, if you will. They go in there and they take advantage of these situations. I have no doubt there are some on the ground here who really don't have a strong feeling one way or another about the topic du jour, but they see it as an opportunity to protest. And in the past, we have found a lot of control, communications between them, which doesn't have to be elaborate. I mean, it can be literally, certainly we've had discussions about senior administration officials using Signal, if you will, to communicate things they shouldn't. Well, they also do the same thing. They'll be using various apps and stuff to communicate things back and forth with the crowd and orchestrate things. And that is pretty much protest 101. We've seen that with protests over the many years. Now, is this funded by some entity? Are there paid protesters out there? I've seen stuff pop up in the media, where just kind of speculation and things like that. I haven't seen anything yet which shows that this is clearly an orchestrated type of thing. Okay. Clearly looked like it was kind of spontaneous on the ground. But once you have something like this happen, there is an invitation to those who like to exploit events like this to do things. Okay. And they may step in some way.
Hal, last question. They keep coming to me. I know I'm extremely interested in this, as so many viewers are. Is there a shelf life on the emergency, so to speak? I'm not going to ask when this is all going to be said and done. We don't know that. That's impossible to foretell here. But Pete Hegseth, the defense secretary, was on Capitol Hill yet again for day 2 of his testimony, and he was asked, how long will the Marines be in this kind of limbo deployment, ready to go if needed? How long does that last? How long can the president keep a state's National Guard in a federalized status? Do we know that?
Well, I will say this. I've heard them say 60 days. I've heard that out there. They're saying this is initially. I think I have not seen a copy of the orders, but it sounds like the orders were initially for 60 days with the, certainly they'd always have the option to extend. How long can you keep National Guard in federalized status? Well, you can keep them in federalized status for years if you wanted. There's really no cap on that. And if you want to go back to World War II, the National Guard troops got federalized and they stayed there until the war was over, plus 6 months. So there's a long time you can do this. But really the cap, the ticking clock in the background is one is a law, as we mentioned on the, as we've talked about, it's called the U.S. Economy Act. It's one of the, when I was doing this, where I was coordinating military support of civil authorities, in all its various incarnations. Two things you looked at. One is you can't violate posse comitatus if they're in federal status. The other was the Economy Act, which basically says that you've got to look for the most economical source of goods and services. Why? Because the military is extremely expensive. And Congress back in the early 30s didn't want various agencies always going to the military to do stuff because it's really expensive, very capable, but really expensive. So there's some things that have to happen. The Secretary of Defense and probably the other secretaries involved, the supporting and supported secretaries, I should say, or cabinet members, have to sign off on a waiver to allow this presence to continue to allow the use of military forces for this particular mission. That's kind of that's a de rigueur administrative step they have to take.
Okay.
But at some point there, Congress will look at it. The courts might look at it and say, did you really need federal troops out there doing this? Could you have found another way to do this? So there is overview. So that's kind of the ticking clock, but there isn't like you got to get them out there in 2 weeks or you got to get them out in 30 days. There's nothing like that.
Okay, there does seem to be an as long as it takes quality to some of the comments coming from Secretary Hegseth and even President Trump, so that's why I asked that question. Hal Kemper, as always, thanks so much. We'll talk soon.
Okay.
Everyone's talking about this post that was made in the dead of night by Elon Musk. Take a look at this. So this was around 3:40 a.m. Eastern time. Elon Musk says, I regret some of my posts about President Trump last week. He says they went too far. So just reading from the piece in the New York Times reporting that Trump and Musk spoke on the phone on Monday night. But you just saw there Musk saying in this post that he regretted some of his posts and comments about President Trump last week, which had led the president to disparage the tech billionaire, a few that played out in real time on social media. Musk said on his X platform some of his posts about Trump went too far. You saw that. Musk called Trump Monday night and they spoke briefly. That's according to a White House official. Now, allies of the two men have been urging them to reconcile. The spat initially focused on Musk's criticism of Trump's signature domestic policy bill, which he condemned as a quote-unquote disgusting abomination because it will add substantially to the national debt. But the spat devolved quickly into petty and outlandish attacks. Musk, for example, suggested that the Trump administration had not released files on Jeffrey Epstein because Trump was named in them. And that was a pretty bombshell report that Musk posted out there for his millions of followers on social media. In the meantime, here we do have a live picture outside the White House as we await for President Trump's departure to the Kennedy Center. We're going to bring into the conversation, though, right now, our friend at Barron's, Al Root. He is kind of our Elon Musk whisperer, so to speak. We talk to Al on all things Elon Musk. So, Al, bear with us. We don't want to miss the president's departure to the Kennedy Center. But I have to ask, is this a thaw? Is this a reset? Is this a détente? How would you describe it?
Hi, Andrew. I like the word détente. You know, I mean, sometimes it seems it was such a wild week. You laid it out quite well. It just sort of played out real time. And, you know, like so much with Elon Musk or Tesla, there's no precedent, right? You don't have a lot of precedent for, you know, the richest person in the world feuding with the most powerful person in the world. It just doesn't happen all that often, if ever. So it was really wild. This détente, I sort of likened it to a bit of a divorce, right? You know, Elon has left his position, you know, and there was a very close relationship, and then it deteriorated very, very quickly. And now they're sort of on the other side where they're sort of getting back together for the kids and being civil. So I wouldn't expect Elon to have sort of the kind of role he had in the Trump administration in the early days. But I think we've reached sort of a more happy equilibrium. I'm just surprised that this entire thing unfolded in basically the course of a week.
Yeah. I mean, I think it was a surprise to many that Elon Musk posted that, like I said, in the dead of night. And maybe, you know, we're just coming to this for viewers for the first time. Maybe they didn't see that post just yet, because I was struck by that because we were speaking just, last Thursday. It got very nasty, very personal. And now we're hearing from some of the reporting that allies of both of them were working behind the scenes to get this resolved. And so I guess that effort was somewhat successful here. I got to ask, though, about Musk's role within the Trump orbit, not necessarily within the government, because he's no longer a special government employee. What is it going to be in the Trump orbit amongst allies? Are there still camps that have formed, the Musk camp, the Trump camp, or no?
Well, I think that the reason to bother getting back together, why do these two need each other at all? I mean, was another post that was somewhat offensive to the president that was talking about, I got you elected, you know, and if, you know, people pass this big, beautiful bill, you know, I'm going to work to unelect or fire the politicians that blow up the deficit, right? So, you know, Elon and Donald Trump, President Trump, don't always agree, right? They disagree a little bit on tariffs. They disagree on national debt and the big, beautiful bill. And those disagreements sort of coexisted. But if you think about, you know, Musk's position of, you know, being the richest person in the world is still a position of power. So the alliance still makes sense. There's money for candidates. There is money for different races. You know, Elon supported the judge, the conservative judge in Wisconsin. That didn't go President Trump's way. However, that sort of support is a good reason to keep Elon in the orbit. And from Elon's perspective, self-driving cars regulation, smoothing the path for SpaceX. I know President Trump talked about removing contracts. But again, you know, some of Elon's businesses do business with the government, and it makes sort of a lot of sense to have a civil relationship. So there's reasons on both sides that you would want this smoothed over if you were a Musk advisor or if you were a President Trump advisor, and they're probably in a bit of a better position now.
So those threats to cancel Musk's federal contracts, do you think those are over?
So, you know, there's always so much going on. So the EV tax credit, you know, that is that's $7,500. You go out and lease an EV. That's available to any EV. I think that's going to go. People knew about that. So that's one of the things people say, oh, the, you know, contracts, the SpaceX stuff. SpaceX gets a lot of money from the government. I personally, you know, pound the table. They earn that money. I mean, remember, they just took the astronauts back from the IS, the International Space Station.
Right.
SpaceX is the dominant launch provider in the world. it's not going to save the U.S. a lot of money, and SpaceX is sort of the global leader in that business, so that doesn't make a lot of sense. You could lose some defense business in the future for SpaceX if this feud continued. But again, I think those threats were more just in the heat of the fight versus anything that would come to fruition and sort of impact one of the companies.
Yeah, and just to give viewers a sense, we're 10 minutes past the top of the hour. We're waiting for the president and the first lady to depart the White House for the Kennedy Center for the opening premiere of Les Mis tonight. We were kind of discussing the changes that the Trump administration has made to kind of the Kennedy Center leadership board and its direction. So, Al, I might have to cut you off if we see the first couple, but I have to ask you this. What about the complexion of Doge now? What is its mission now? Is it the same without him?
I think the honest answer, first of all, I can't believe I would be preempted for the president. What's going on? I think the honest answer is Doge will lose some of the impetus behind it without a figure like Musk. Musk clashed very publicly with Marco Rubio. He is very dedicated to the cuts. He believes very deeply in reducing the budget. And, I might feel that way too, but I'm not Elon Musk. So I think that Doge will continue. They'll continue to rack up savings. I think it might morph into sort of modernizing government systems, right? Making them more computer-based and user-friendly. So there'll be reports about that. But, remember, Musk said, aspirationally, 2 trillion, 1 trillion, let's save this much money, fraud, waste, and abuse. I think those numbers are sort of gone. And so now we're looking at more modest savings and sort of just a more modest Doge effort.
So, Al, what about Musk's supporters that he brought into the Trump White House? I'm talking about David Sachs. We know how his preferred NASA pick, Jared Isaacman, we know how that ended. Trump withdrew his name from consideration to lead NASA. Where do they stand in the Trump orbit? Will they also be on the way out soon?
Well, Isaac, to your point, Isaac, that was one of the straws that may or may not have broken the camel's back, depending on what you believe. So that was a bit of a surprise and a sign that things were fraying. On the David Sachs of it all, I think that from a cryptocurrency perspective, this administration will continue to go down some of the roads, and David Sachs is sort of an advisor on that front. So tough to say. I could see somebody like David Sachs sticking around, and some of the other advisors, people who work at Doge, carrying on. So I don't think it's sort of a clean house moment.
Okay.
And again, I think the feud sort of settling down gives everybody the ability to sort of figure out what they really want to do next. But on the, the crypto stuff, I think that'll continue in this administration. Doge is a lessened impetus, and then Musk will just sort of fade into the background and be a supporter from afar. That would be my prediction.
My observation here, while we're watching this live picture, this camera outside the White House, before this disagreement between Musk and Trump, this would be one of the kind of key events, kind of your standard event that you would see Musk accompany Trump to, wouldn't you? You're not going to see that much anymore, I would imagine.
No, I don't think he'll be taking up space in Mar-a-Lago like he was. And if you remember, if you go sort of all the way back, these things play out in weeks and days. So all the way back to April, or even reporting in March that Musk was going to transition, go back to his companies. President Trump said in a news conference, eventually he'll want to go back to his companies. Then in April on Tesla's conference call, he said, listen, I'm going to step back. I'm going to spend more time running my companies. He's very busy. He's got robo-taxis. He's got Starship. He's got XAI and X merging. So he's got a lot to do. And then, there was the press conference at the White House where he got the key to the White House. They thanked each other. And then it sort of deteriorated. So, there was this process of sort of stepping back and spending more time at his companies. And I think from a Musk perspective and from an investor perspective, from his businesses, that's what you'll see. You'll see him more focused on his companies. He's obviously remained relatively political
All right, we may have lost Al Root's signal there, unfortunately. We'll see if it corrects itself. That happens sometimes during these live Zoom interviews. We're at the mercy of the technology here. In the meantime, though, we do have this live picture still yet again as we await President Trump and the First Lady's departure from the White House to the Kennedy Center. Speaking of the Kennedy Center, we also have a live picture there on the red carpet for the Kennedy Center Gala, which will premiere tonight. Les Miserables, of course. Personally, just one of my favorite musicals. And so we've been seeing some of these Trump cabinet secretaries come and go. We're working on getting Al Root back just so he can finish his point here. I think we might have him back. And so, Al, we're at the mercy of Zoom technology. But, Al, if you could just finish your point.
Where'd I leave off?
You were talking about whether or not we'll be seeing Musk with Trump much at all.
Yeah, I was talking to myself there for a second. I think that, part of this healing I was saying, happened on X when Musk started liking some of President Trump's posts criticizing Gavin Newsom. Musk supported the president's policy on the LA riots. So I would think that you would see more of that sort of support from afar, and that Musk would remain focused on his companies, which is what investors wanted, what he started talking about all the way back in April. So I would say that Musk will go back to sort of being a businessman who supports Trump, and a little more publicly than other people, because Musk is Musk and he values his ability to say what he wants when he wants, and you'll see that sort of show up on the X platform. But I don't think there will be as many Les Mis visits, Mar-a-Lago visits, a little X in the Oval Office, Musk's young son that comes. So you'll probably see less of that.
All right, Al Root, can't thank you enough. I know we went a little long there. Always appreciate your insight. We'll talk soon. Thanks, Al.
Thanks, Andrew.
And welcome back here to Live Now from Fox. I'm Andrew Kraft. As we approach the top of the next hour, wanted to take the time. I know so many music fans are really reeling after the loss of who is being described as a musical legend. I'm talking, of course, about Brian Wilson, rather, the founder of the Beach Boys, the visionary and fragile leader whose genius for melody, arrangements, and wide-eyed self-expression inspired the songs Good Vibrations, California Girls, and other summertime anthems. The Associated Press is calling him the poet laureate of summer. Fox's Julie Banderas has more.
He was the beach boy behind California Girls, Good Vibrations, and Surfin' USA. Brian Wilson was born on June 20th, 1942, in Inglewood, California. At age 3, Brian could sing on key to his mother's piano playing. The self-taught sopranist preferred to learn music by listening to records. However, at age 11, an examination revealed he had suffered significant hearing loss in his right ear. Wilson later said his condition was the result of years of abuse from his father. In 1959, Wilson enrolled in junior college, but dropped out after a year to pursue his passion for music. Brian and his two brothers, Carl and Dennis, decided to form a band. They asked good friends Al Jardine and Mike Love to join. Their first single, Surfin', rose to number 75 on Billboard's singles chart, and Capitol Records immediately signed the group. In 1963, Brian met Marilyn Rovell from the pop trio The Honeys. The two fell in love and were married a year later. They had two daughters, Carney and Wendy. In 1966, the Beach Boys released Pet Sounds and Good Vibrations, both written and produced by Brian. In 1974, the Beach Boys released another #1 album, Endless Summer, and were riding the wave of success. However, offstage, Brian struggled with his newfound fame and developed a serious addiction to drugs and alcohol. His marriage suffered as well. In December of 1983, brother Dennis died tragically in a drowning accident in California. In 1986, his life and career got back on track, and 2 years later, the Beach Boys were inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. In 1995, Brian found love again, this time with former model Melinda Ledbetter. Wilson made a comeback in 1998 and continued to make music through 2008. Brian Wilson's moving lyrics and catchy melodies swept his listeners away. Julie Banderas, Fox News.
Julie, thanks so much. What a life. What a tribute. We want to talk about it even further with our friend and colleague there at Fox 9 in Minneapolis, Adam Lawrence. He joins me. Adam, you're also a fan as well, and you've been following so much of the tributes pouring in. I want to put up some of them that we've compiled here on social media, and there are so many. And you see there, I'm going to read out some of them from the Reagan Presidential Library. You see there from Sean Lennon, of course, the son of John and Yoko, and so many. Mick Fleetwood as well, Keith Richards too. Adam, your first thoughts on the passing of Wilson?
Instrumental from God Only Knows. It really is touching, and this was a guy. Look, I'm 33 years old, and Brian Wilson's music and the Beach Boys' music has touched me. I was born in Los Angeles, and Brian Wilson, you know, it's not very often that we can say somebody was really a voice of a city. I think it's safe to say that Brian Wilson was the voice of Los Angeles, certainly the voice of Southern California. As Julia mentioned, they're born in Inglewood at Centinela Hospital, and co-founded the Beach Boys along with his brothers and their cousin Mike Love and their friend Al, and really just created this sound that has lasted now generations. And I think it's safe to say that their music will be going on for generations to come. You know, the songs that get all of the headlines there, Andrew, are a lot of the surfer songs that were first up for them in the 1960s. Obviously, Julia mentioned their first hit, Surfin', and then Surfin' USA, where they list out all of the great surfing spots in Southern California: Redondo Beach, Doheny Way down in Dana Point, La Jolla down in San Diego. You know, those surfing songs really encapsulated an entire generation of Southern Californians. One that my parents belonged to in the 1960s, where the car was at the focal point of life there, and a lot of their songs, you know, She's Real Fine, My 409, Little Deuce Coupe, Little Honda. Obviously, we talked about the surfing music, the romance songs, Help Me Rhonda, All Summer Long, Ba 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 Barbara Brand. I mean, these are songs that are a part of the American songbook now, and really kind of captured the imaginations, like I said, of an entire region and an entire culture of people. And I think it's safe to say that Brian Wilson and the Beach Boys are really responsible, as much as really anything else, for really expanding Southern California culture, not just here in the United States, but really around the world through their music.
Yeah, Adam, I was struck by that. The Associated Press has it that the Beach Boys rank among the most popular groups of the rock era with more than 30 singles in the top 40 and worldwide sales of more than 100 million. And you could make the argument that they were coming up at the same time as the Beatles in the mid-'60s, and they were purely Americana, really distinguishing this Southern California voice, the Southern California sound that is timeless, is multi-generational, that people are still listening to.
Absolutely. And it was, like you mentioned there, Andrew, the emergence of Beatlemania and the Beatles coming onto the American shores that really kind of inspired the Beach Boys to not so much surf away, shift away from their surfer music. I listed a lot of their great songs. You got to throw in there the Beach Boys Christmas album. Obviously, everybody knows Little Saint Nick, but, you know, Merry Christmas Baby and Christmas Day were also great tunes from that. But when the Beatles came to the United States, that really kind of forced the Beach Boys not so much to reinvent themselves per se, but really, as Brian put it in an interview later, to step on the gas and really kind of make themselves a more whole, a more full sort of complete band. And that transition is really encapsulated in 1966 album Pet Sounds. Andrew, I consider it perhaps the greatest album ever recorded in American music. I know there are a lot of people out there that will agree with me on that. These songs really kind of shifted from that laid-back surfer vibe into more instrumental melodies and harmonies that really kind of focused on songwriting, lyrical presentation, and really sort of the music that's behind the voices. We have a lot of people out there that consider themselves singer-songwriters. Brian Wilson was truly the definition of that, and his sort of masterpiece sort of work would have been Pet Sounds right there. The lead song, Wouldn't It Be Nice? Just a beautiful, beautiful hymn that really kind of yearns for a more youthful longing to get older there. Let's Go Away for a While, completely instrumental. God Only Knows, Andrew, that's a song that you and I have probably heard at weddings before. Yeah. Sloop John B., which was a traditional Caribbean folk hymn that the Beach Boys kind of reinvented and put into their own sound. And then obviously, like I said, like the reporter said earlier, later in 1966, Good Vibrations. These are songs that are now a part, like I said, of the American songbook, and songs that generations to come will all be listening to.
Yeah, I mean, his musicology, his discography is just so vast, and it was a difficult life. We don't have to dwell on some of those aspects. Julie Banderas highlighted some of those that came with the fame of the Beach Boys. And he had kind of multiple acts in his life as far as his music career goes. So I really thought that was so comprehensive. But really, to your point, Adam, he is in kind of the pantheon of these musical greats, distinctly American. Adam, thanks so much. Good to see you. Talk soon.
Thanks very much, Andrew. Appreciate you all.
All right, in the meantime, our final note on this is how the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame is remembering on social media Brian Wilson. Let's play this for you.
Over the years, the Beach Boys have been in style and out of style and in style again. But what kept me going is the same thing that got me to write Surfing all those years ago. I wanted to write joyful music that made other people feel good. That's what I tried to do for the past 27 years. So, we're going to do our best to keep sending out those good vibrations. We want to do the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame proud. And 27 years from now, I'd like to come back and get reinducted all over again.
All right, and as you can see there, during the ceremony to induct the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame members in 1988, and you saw there also Mick Jagger and others on hand when Brian Wilson was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. And so we send our thoughts, our condolences to his family, his friends, and his legion of fans. All right, I'm Andrew Kraft. We're in a new hour. Let's take our first commercial break. Still so much more to get to in 2 minutes. And welcome back here to Live Now from Fox. I'm Andrew Kraft. All right, out to the Kennedy Center, red carpet there. Take a look at this. The second couple, Vice President Vance, Second Lady Usha Vance, as we wait for President Trump and the First Lady to depart the White House, which they have not done just yet here. So you can see, actually, let's listen. The Vice President is speaking just a little bit.
He's right behind me now giving some remarks, so I'll try not to speak too loudly to be interrupting him. He's one of many VIP guests here attending as the first...
Okay, so you also see and hear some of the other reporters and hosts on the ground for the red carpet. It's picking up their audio, so you can't really make out what the Vice President is saying. Let's take this shot here as we wait for the first couple to leave the White House, to depart for the Kennedy Center for the season premiere of the production of Les Miserables. Like I said, we're just kind of in a waiting period, not entirely sure when they will leave the White House. We've seen a lot of activity of staffers, Secret Service, and the like kind of come and go from the White House there, but have not yet seen the first couple, though the Beast is parked. It's ready to go in the driveway, so we'll just wait for that. But in the meantime, like I said, we don't want to miss it, but we do have to move on to some more of these other top headlines, including yet another day. Day 2 of testimony on Capitol Hill from the Secretary of Defense, Pete Hegseth, on a whole host of topics. This, as so many are wondering, why is the Pentagon drawing down some embassy personnel in places in the Middle East, like in Iraq, Kuwait, and Bahrain as well. So we're going to get into that. I do want to let you listen to just a little bit of some of the testimony from Secretary Hegseth today. Let's watch.
In real time at that moment, we even stood over maps and looked at routes to make sure we were ensuring that routes of Blackhawks were away from the flight path so that it didn't happen again. There are essential reasons why you may need to move along a corridor similar to that, but there is no authorization for VIP or convenience flights along that route. That is not the case and will not remain the case. You have our assurance that I'm working with Secretary Duffy very closely to make sure that the only flights that would be even in a modified path would be those that are necessary and authorized.
And that ban, except for that ban on non-essential flights, including VIP transportation, remains in effect until Secretary Duffy reaches a conclusion if it's possible to fly safely.
We are in direct coordination with Secretary Duffy, and we take his recommendations very seriously and work together, and only where there's a dynamic and ongoing need for the Defense Department would we push back and try to figure out a middle ground.
Thank you, and I compliment you on your response and engagement on January the 29th. I appreciate that very much, including the conversation you and I had that evening.
All right, that's Senator Jerry Moran, the Republican of Kansas, questioning Secretary Hegseth about the deadly midair collision over the Potomac in late January. You'll remember, of course, one of our key stories, horrible stories this year, that Black Hawk Army helicopter that collided with that American Airlines regional jet, talking about some of the routes along the Potomac outside Reagan Airport there. That was kind of the line of questioning you were listening to. Let's bring into the conversation right now someone who covers the Pentagon each and every day there at the Washington Examiner, reporter Mike Brest. He joins me. Mike, thanks for being with us here. Good to see you again. There was a lot involved and detailed in now day 2 of this testimony, this time in front of the Senate. Yesterday, it was in front of the House. What were some of the highlights from Hegseth today? What was he asked?
Thanks for having me on. So one of the primary focuses of the hearing today, as yesterday, was the Pentagon's response and decision to deploy both the National Guard as well as Marines to California regarding the riots there. And so the Secretary remains aggressively in support of both his and the President's decision. He had repeatedly come under attack and question both his and the President's decision regarding both the legalities behind those decisions as well as sort of how it's been implemented, because we've seen so far over about 2,000 National Guards troops deployed already. We've seen about 700 Marines deployed already. And so there are a lot of technicalities and legalities about what these U.S. troops are allowed to do on U.S. soil, given that legally, barring special requirements that the president has to issue, U.S. troops are not legally allowed to operate on U.S. soil. Another topic that came up in today's hearing in particular was the Trump administration's support or lack thereof for Ukraine moving forward. It was Senator and Chairman of the committee, Mitch McConnell, who was the first one to question Secretary Hegseth, who in his very first question asked who the aggressor in the Russia-Ukraine war is, and the secretary obviously answered with Russia. And then when the chairman of the committee, again, a Republican, but one of the three that didn't vote for Secretary Hegseth's confirmation, asked whom he believed the U.S. is rooting for to win the war, and the secretary didn't answer directly, instead saying that the administration is pursuing peace at all costs. And so that was something that stood out again and was brought up again later in the hearing by Senator Lindsey Graham, another Republican, but a staunch Ukraine defender.
So, Mike, I have to ask this as well. What about Signalgate? And you can remind our viewers what that was, a key story in March. Was he questioned about that? Because from what I'm told, there is an Inspector General report on their investigation into Signalgate coming out very soon at the Pentagon, isn't there?
There is. And so there are a couple things. Number one, it was not a primary point of questioning from either the House committee yesterday or the Senate committee today. The only times it really came up today were in passing from Democrats who were denigrating the secretary. And so for your audience who may not remember, Signalgate is the story about how the Secretary of Defense posted or shared detailed classified information about upcoming attacks on the Houthis in a Signal group chat. Now, Signal is an encrypted app for messaging, but at the same time, it is not approved by the Department of Defense for the sharing of classified material. And so what we now know is that the secretary shared some of these details about the impending operation in not one, but two group chats, one of which was the one that was widely reported on at the time that featured over a dozen cabinet officials and unknowingly to them, a reporter from The Atlantic. But there's a second group chat that was going on at the same time that featured some of the secretary's advisors, as well as both his wife, his brother, and his personal attorney. Though both his brother and the personal attorney work in the Department of Defense, they are not necessarily in positions that would usually be included in such sensitive information. And so you're right that there is a Department of Defense Inspector General investigation, and they're looking into all of this. And so we're still waiting to see the details of what comes of the investigation, but it's ongoing.
Okay, obviously the reason these cabinet secretaries keep getting hauled before these committees on Capitol Hill is to talk about their budgetary process. Has the Pentagon submitted their budget to the relevant committees, and if not, why not?
So the Pentagon has presented a broad framework of what they expect their defense budget to be. However, they have been slow to roll it out, which is something members of both committees were quick to point out. That being said, it's not uncommon for the first year in any administration to have a delayed budget, given that there's so many new things ongoing. There were a number of critics in today's hearing who were pushing the secretary, given the lack of specificities involved in all of the information they've received thus far.
Okay, Mike, while we have you, and I know you cover the Pentagon extremely closely, there's a lot of reporting, there's a lot of talk about what the Pentagon is doing right now, and you can clarify whether or not this is on a temporary basis or permanent, of drawing down some of the U.S. Embassy personnel in the Middle East over some of these kind of threat postures that are going on. I want to put up this from your contemporary at Reuters, Idris Ali. He covers the Pentagon. He says the U.S. Embassy in Iraq is preparing for an ordered departure due to heightened security risks in the region. That's according to officials. So if you could, Mike, what is going on here? What is the increased threat posture? Do we know?
So a lot of the details are still, I would say, speculative in this phase at this exact moment. But what we do know is that the U.S. and Iran were set to have the latest round of nuclear negotiations this weekend. And we've heard from the president both yesterday and today that he is less optimistic than he was even a week ago about the these negotiations working out. And you add in the fact that earlier today, the Iranian defense minister said that if negotiations failed and there was a conflict emerging, all U.S. bases in the region would be at risk. And so while it may not be an exact causation, there's definitely a correlation here between the threat and then the decision that's come out today from both the State Department as well as the Department of Defense about the removal of personnel who are not required to be in the region.
All right, Mike, we just saw President Trump and the First Lady there get into the Beast on his way to the Kennedy Center. Let's just pause briefly. We heard him, or at least we saw him mouth to the press, "Thank you very much." And so let's just hold on this while the Beast travels not too far to the Kennedy Center there in Washington. The First Lady as well in the back with the President. All right, and there it goes. So we're going to hold on that unless it goes to color bars. Mike, last question, though, on all of these moves there. No U.S. troops are being brought back, are they?
Not that has been announced to this point. And so a big part of it is, as your audience will remember, any time that there has been heightened tensions in the Middle East, the U.S. has actually done the opposite. They brought in reinforcements both times when there was posturing and then ultimately an attack from Iran against Israel. Yeah. And so in both of those instances, the U.S. really surged both equipment and personnel to the region. So as they are moving civilians out, we haven't seen any indication that they could be moving more personnel and equipment into the region, but that could be on the table.
All right, Mike Bress, we're going to have to leave it at that. Thanks so much for your time. Talk soon.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, in the meantime here, we're at the bottom of the hour, 3:30 here on the West Coast, 6:30 there in Washington. Let's take a quick commercial break. Let's catch our breaths. A lot more to get to, though, on this busy Wednesday.
Welcome back into Live Now from Fox. I'm Andy Mack. White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt details the latest on anti-ICE protests in Southern California, a trade deal between the U.S. and China, and more.
How are you? Good to see you all. What we have seen transpire in Los Angeles, California in recent days is shameful. Left-wing radicals waving foreign flags viciously attacked ICE and Border Patrol agents as well as Los Angeles police officers. These criminals injured police, threw rocks at police cars and officers, burned vehicles, shut down freeways, and lobbed Molotov cocktails, all because the Trump administration was removing violent criminal illegal aliens from the city. These attacks were aimed not just at law enforcement, but at American culture and society itself. Rioters burned American flags, chanted "Death to ICE," and spray-painted anti-American slogans on buildings. But President Trump will never allow mob rule to prevail in America. The most basic duty of government is to preserve law and order, and this administration embraces that sacred responsibility. Democrats like Governor Gavin Newsom and Mayor Karen Bass shamefully failed to meet their sworn obligations to their citizens. They didn't have the courage to do the right thing and protect law-abiding Californians from rioters. That's why President Trump deployed the National Guard and mobilized Marines to end the chaos and restore law and order. The mob violence is being stomped out. The criminals responsible will be swiftly brought to justice, and the Trump administration's operations to arrest illegal aliens are continuing unabated. When the initial immigration enforcement actions took place on June 6th, Mayor Bass took to social media to say she was deeply angered by what has taken place. Mayor Bass then embarked on one of the most outrageous campaign of lies this country has ever seen from an elected official, blaming President Trump and brave law enforcement officers for the violence. She accused heroic American immigration and customs enforcement officers targeting illegal alien murderers, rapists, and pedophiles of, quote, sowing terror in communities and disrupting basic principles of safety in our city. Around the same time, Governor Newsom claimed that immigration enforcement actions were causing chaos. That's how radical Democrats have become. Their opposition to President Trump has forced them to side with illegal alien criminals in their communities and violent rioters and looters over law enforcement officers who are just doing their jobs. Mayor Bass and Governor Newsom fanned the flames and demonized our brave ICE officers. Instead of defending their city and their state, Karen Bass and Gavin Newsom claimed that in order for the riots and the violence to stop, ICE needed to leave and immigration raids must end. In other words, the position of the Democrat Party is that the federal government is not allowed to enforce our laws and to arrest and deport illegal alien criminals. They're attempting to use a violent mob as a weapon against their own constituents to prevent the enforcement of immigration law. This is deeply un-American and morally reprehensible. President Trump received a clear mandate from voters to reverse the illegal invasion ushered in by Joe Biden's open border and to end the lawlessness represented by Karen Bass and Gavin Newsom's California. President Trump promised to carry out the largest mass deportation campaign in American history, and left-wing riots will not deter him in that effort. Sanctuary cities and states will no longer be allowed to shield illegal criminals from deportation. Just take a look at some of the illegal monsters who were taken off the streets in Los Angeles in recent days. A Vietnamese national, a known gang member with a conviction for second-degree murder. A Mexican national with convictions for child molestation who was armed with a dangerous weapon and had previous arrests for robbery and domestic violence. A Filipino national with convictions of rape, assault, burglary, and theft. A Mexican national convicted of statutory rape, narcotics violations, and hit and run. A Nicaraguan national with convictions for domestic violence and hit and run, and a previous arrest for willful cruelty to a child. And an illegal alien from Mexico who was arrested after allegedly throwing a Molotov cocktail at law enforcement officers during the Paramount riots on Saturday. He is now being charged with attempted murder. Law-abiding American citizens do not want these public safety threats living in their communities, no matter what Democrats like Karen Bass and Gavin Newsom may claim. And let this be an unequivocal message to left-wing radicals in other parts of the country who are thinking about copycatting the violence in an effort to stop this administration's mass deportation efforts. You will not succeed. Any lawlessness will only strengthen this president's resolve to defend the majority of Americans who want to live their lives peacefully, free from the fear of violent criminal illegal aliens. As President Trump said, order will be maintained and illegal aliens will be expelled from our country. In economic news, the latest Consumer Price Index inflation report came in today below expectations again. Since President Trump took office, inflation has come in below economics expectations every single month. Core inflation held steady and remains at the lowest level since March of 2021. Wage growth remains strong. The average private sector worker is on track to see their real earnings increase by around $1,200 adjusted for inflation. And prices continue to fall for everyday Americans. Energy prices fell from April to May. Gasoline has fallen each month since President Trump took office, down 12% over the past year. And prices for meat, poultry, eggs, and fish are all down from April to May as well. Under President Trump's strong leadership, America is beating Joe Biden's record-high inflation crisis. And once the One Big Beautiful bill passes, our economy will boom like never before. This bill is the largest tax cut for middle-class Americans in history. The One Big Beautiful bill gives a 15% tax cut to working Americans and families. We'll see increased take-home pay of $10,000 per year. The One Big Beautiful bill expands the child tax credit to $2,500 for more than 40 million American families with children. And the One Big Beautiful bill cuts taxes for overtime workers, saving them nearly $2,000 per year, and ends taxes on tips, saving tipped workers nearly $2,000 per year as well. All of these provisions are broadly popular with an overwhelming support from the American people. We need Republicans in Congress to finish the job and send the One Big Beautiful bill back to President Trump's desk for his signature as soon as possible. With that, we'll get to questions. I'm sure you have many of them today. Here in our new media seat is Elizabeth Mitchell, the White House correspondent for the Daily Signal, who's not afforded a seat in this room, but today she is. Thank you, Elizabeth.
Thank you so much, Caroline. I have two questions, if it's okay. First, a few Republicans on Capitol Hill are suggesting that President Trump scale back deportations, even as ICE is reportedly gearing up for raids in 5 more Democrat-led areas. Would anything dissuade President Trump, and would he consider sending in Marines if anti-ICE violence occurs in these cities?
Well, I think I may have just answered both of your questions with my opening monologue. The Trump administration is going to continue the mass deportation effort that the president promised the American public. Many of you were at those rallies in cities and communities across the country when the president spoke about his commitment to removing violent illegal criminals and anyone who has broken our nation's immigration laws from American communities. And God bless our ICE and Border Patrol who are working hard on that effort. This administration is going to continue that. And it's part of the reason we do need the One Big Beautiful bill to pass as well, may I add, because the bill provides funding to hire more ICE agents and Border Patrol agents, more personnel on the ground to conduct this important public safety work.
Thank you. And on another topic, President Trump has indicated that aides to former President Biden who used the auto pen to sign major orders and pardons should be investigated for potential crimes. Does he think that Biden allowing, or at least being negligently unaware of this activity, was an impeachable offense?
I haven't heard the president address whether it's an impeachable offense, but it could perhaps be a criminal offense, especially on behalf of staffers who may have been utilizing the president's signature without his authority or consent. I understand that Republicans on the Hill are moving in the right direction to call attention to this and to bring in some former White House staffers who clearly knew more than they ever shared and never addressed with the American public. And so we look forward to seeing where this investigation continues, and I know the Department of Justice is also looking into the matter as well. Alex, good to see you today.
Good to see you, Caroline. Thank you. You mentioned foreign flags being blown during these protests. There are protest activities being organized for this weekend. Part of it are Democrats saying they want to reclaim the American flag. It's also being titled No King's Day. Does the president see himself as a king, and does the White House expect to see American flags being flown during these protests this weekend?
The president views himself as the president of the United States of America. This is a constitutional republic, and we want to see all of our citizens be proud of the country in which they are given the privilege and the blessing to live. And I think those images of foreign flags being waved with, by illegal criminals and by violent rioters in the face of cars blowing up and of flames in the city. I have photos of that here to show you. With this violence and destruction that occurred is an image that Governor Gavin Newsom owns. This is his city, and President Trump saw these images and he said that is not going to be accepted or tolerated, and hence why he deployed the National Guard and United States Marines who have helped to quell that violence.
If I can ask another,
sure.
If the president does end up deploying any National Guard members, perhaps Marines, to blue states, would he be in contact with the governors prior to this? Would it be necessary?
Well, President Trump was in contact with Governor Gavin Newsom despite some of the claims he's made in the last couple of days. The president called the governor on Friday evening and told him to let law enforcement in California do their jobs. And the Los Angeles Police Department, by the way, are fantastic people. They are trying to do the work that they've so bravely signed up to do to enforce the law, but they have been kneecapped by incompetent Democrat policies and Democrat politicians who do not allow their local law enforcement to correspond and coordinate with federal immigration authorities. And so the president gave Gavin Newsom a warning and said, get it together. 24 hours later, we saw more images like this. We heard about Border Patrol agents who were being the target of rocks. These illegal criminals were throwing rocks at our Border Patrol and ICE agents, and so the president made the decision to federalize California's National Guard. Stephanie.
Thank you. Two questions on the China trade deal, if I may.
Sure.
First, will the president formally sign the trade deal, and if so, when? Secretary Lutnick sort of alluded to the fact that it might be in a couple of days, but I'm curious if there's anything more specific to read out.
Sure. Well, I do have more specifics for you. I spoke to the president about this. He spoke to his trade team, who did a fantastic job negotiating this on behalf of the United States and meeting with their Chinese counterparts. The president is talking to them about the details of it now. But what the president heard, he liked. China has agreed to open their markets to the United States separately of this deal. And when it comes to this deal, we're going back to the terms that were agreed upon in Geneva for the release of some of those critical minerals and the magnets from China to the United States. And we have agreed to fully comply with the Geneva Agreement as well. So the president is reviewing the details of that with his trade team now, and you'll hear more from him, I'm sure.
And then the second question, on tariffs, Secretary Lutnick suggested that the tariffs would remain unchanged with China. I'm wondering if there's any room for them to negotiate even lower, or if this is the floor.
I won't get ahead of any further negotiations. We're in a great place right now, and I would add that this is the result of a lot of hard work from the president and his team, and the president has a good and respectful relationship with President Xi, and as you know, they had a direct conversation which led to this success that the president announced on Truth Social this morning. JJ.
On North Korea, has the president tried to resume dialogue with Kim Jong-un? There's some reporting that the president sent a letter and tried to give it to Kim Jong-un through some North Korean diplomats through the UN, and they declined to take it and send it to Kim Jong-un.
The president remains receptive to correspondence with Kim Jong-un, and he'd like to see the progress that was made at that summit in Singapore, which I know you covered in 2018 during his first term. As for specific correspondence, I'll leave that to the president to answer. Sure.
Good afternoon. Yeah, thanks. Back to the trade deal negotiations with China. Jimmy Lai, as you know, is a pro-democracy advocate, Catholic, sitting in solitary confinement in Hong Kong as we speak. His family believes he may be close to death. Did his name come up, Jimmy Lai's name come up in these negotiations with China?
Not to my knowledge. I understand the negotiations were very much focused on our trade and economic relationship with China.
And coming up after the break, we'll take you out to hear the remainder of these remarks. back in to Live Now from Fox. I'm Andy Mack. Let's quickly take you out to hear the remainder of this event.
The president believes he can free Jimmy Lai from prison.
I'll check with the president. It's certainly an important issue, and I'll get back to you.
Thanks, Caroline. The president said yesterday that paid insurrectionists were behind or involved in the protests in Los Angeles. Does the White House have any more details about who they believe is paying these protesters?
The president spoke about this last night when he returned from Fort Bragg, because frankly the president has a lot of common sense. And if you look at some of the imagery that we have received from the Department of Homeland Security and ICE and law enforcement who are on the ground, you will see boxes and boxes of very professionalized masks and rioting equipment being dropped off for these protesters. So it's a good question the president is raising, and one we are looking into, about who is funding these insurrectionists and these rioters and these protesters and these illegal criminals. And I have updates for you on the numbers, by the way. Since June 6th, there have been 330 illegal aliens that have been arrested as part of these riots in Los Angeles. 113 of those illegal aliens had prior criminal convictions. And overall, and this includes arrests of American citizens, there's been 157 people arrested for assault and obstruction-related charges, including the attempted murder of a police officer with a Molotov cocktail. So who is funding these illegal aliens who are coming in with this very professional riot gear? It's a question everyone in this room who cares about truth should be asking. And we encourage your help in trying to get to the bottom of that question. Indita.
Thank you, Caroline. About Elon Musk, he issued an apology this morning. Has the president accepted the apology, or does he think it's too little, too late?
The president acknowledged the statement that Elon put out this morning, and he is appreciative of it, and we are continuing to focus on the business of the American people.
And has the administration started a review of Musk's government contracts, something that the president said he's considering?
What do you mean by that?
Has the administration started a review of the contracts that Musk and his companies currently have?
No efforts have been made on that front as far as I'm aware.
Okay. And just one more, if I may, on just everything sort of we've seen so far with the president's response to the LA protests. There is criticism that seems to suggest that the president responded the way he did because it was a deliberate, calculated attempt to sort of shift focus away from his feud with Musk. How would you respond to that?
The president responded to the LA riots, condemning the violence
from Musk.
That's an incredibly disingenuous attack. The president saw images of Border Patrol and ICE agents being hailed with rocks and Molotov cocktails. He saw vehicles being burned to the ground with illegal aliens flying foreign flags, and that's what prompted the president to have this response that has clearly worked, because last night in Los Angeles, you didn't see many of those images. And I would add the governor and the mayor need to actually do more. I know Gavin Newsom had a big address to the nation last night. I guess he thought that's what it was for maybe his future political ambitions, but he spoke a lot of words. We haven't seen action. California has been a mess for years because of the incompetence of Gavin Newsom, so the president was responding to that only. Caitlin.
Caroline, two questions for you.
Sure.
Over the weekend, Secretary Noem sent a memo to the Pentagon asking Secretary Hegseth to have and direct the military that's on the ground in LA to arrest and detain what she said were lawbreakers. Is the president okay with that? And under what authority would the members of the military be able to arrest people inside the United States?
I can't speak for a letter that came from the Department of Homeland Security. I can't speak for the president and what's currently happening on the ground now. And as you know, the president federalized the National Guard under U.S. Code 10, which he has the authority to do. And our United States Marines and the National Guardsmen and women who are on the ground right now are helping to create a peaceful environment for ICE and Border Patrol, who were being, again, hailed with rocks, who were being violently and viciously attacked. They needed reinforcements, and so our United States Marines who are on the ground are providing those reinforcements to ensure the environment is peaceful so that these raids and deportations can continue.
But he realizes they can't actually arrest people unless he invokes the Insurrection Act, which, I mean, seemingly was not something that was in Secretary Noem's memo a clear distinction she did not make there.
Again, you're trying to conflate a letter that was sent to the Department of Homeland Security to the president's legal authority. The president understands the legal authority that he invoked, and that's the current situation right now.
When it comes to federalizing the National Guard, what is the specific criteria that the president is using for when he's deciding to do that, and in which states?
The president was asked and answered this yesterday. He wants to see an end to the chaos and the violence. He doesn't want to see law enforcement officers being attacked. He wants to see peace. He wants law-abiding Californians to be able to bring their kids to school, to be able to go to work without seeing this violence in the streets. That's what the president's hoping for, and that's why he's taken this action. John.
Thanks a lot, Caroline. Two questions on two separate topics. One has to do with the military parade taking place here in Washington this weekend. There's a lot of security around the White House complex, around the Capitol complex, even along the tidal basin. Is that just proactive? Are you expecting anything in particular in terms of unrest like we've seen in Los Angeles?
These are proactive security measures to protect those marching in the parade, many of whom will be veterans and our brave men and women in uniform and Gold Star families. There's going to be military families from around the country who are flying into this parade. And of course, it's to protect the spectators who will be enjoying this incredibly patriotic show on Saturday. And I hope you all join us there.
And then secondly, Secretary Pete Hegseth testified on the Senate side of the Capitol today.
Yes.
And he was asked about America's the administration's view of Vladimir Putin's intentions, and specifically it was asked whether or not his intentions go beyond, his territorial ambitions go beyond Ukraine. When that question was posed to the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Kane replied that he does believe that his territorial ambitions go beyond Ukraine, but Secretary Hegseth says it's not clear at this point. How does the president view this issue?
The president has spoken on this. He said, as he calls it, he believes Ukraine was always the apple of Putin's eye. And he made it very clear to Putin in his first term not to invade Ukraine. Putin didn't invade Ukraine because of President Trump's peace through strength foreign policy agenda and the effective deterrence policies that he implemented in the first term. Unfortunately, because of the weakness and incompetence of the previous administration, Vladimir Putin made the decision to invade Ukraine, and now we have this brutal war which the president is working very hard to end. Jasmine.
Thanks so much, Caroline. The president warned that any protests on Saturday would be met with force. Can you clarify what kind of protest President Trump does support or find acceptable?
The president absolutely supports peaceful protests. He supports the First Amendment. He supports the right of Americans to make their voices heard. He does not support violence of any kind. He does not support assaulting law enforcement officers who are simply trying to do their job. It's very clear for the president what he supports and what he does not. Unfortunately for Democrats, that line has not been made clear, and they've allowed this unrest and this violence to continue, and the president has had to step in.
What question? So if there were peaceful protests on Saturday for the military parade, President Trump would allow that?
Of course the president supports peaceful protests. What a stupid question. Raquel.
Thank you so much, Caroline.
Raquel, and then I can go to you, Francis. Go.
Thank you so much, Caroline. I have two questions. One about Israel. Yesterday, the U.S. ambassador to Israel said the U.S. no longer is pursuing the goal of an independent Palestinian state. Can you confirm that the president is no longer supporting a two-state solution? And is President Trump considering diplomatic action against countries who takes action against Israel during next week's UN conference?
Right now, the president views the situation in Israel and Gaza as deeply unfortunate and needing to end. And the president is realistic about the current state of affairs in this region of the world. And that's why the president has said the #1 focus and priority of the administration is to release all of the hostages from Gaza and to end this conflict as soon as possible. The administration is still pushing very hard for the release of all the hostages. And as for what happens next, clearly Gaza is an uninhabitable place. It needs to be rebuilt with the help of our Arab partners, and the president wants to see that happen as well. Take a couple
more. One on the G7 engagement. President Trump is traveling there on Sunday. Other presidents beyond the G7 leaders are also going. President Lula from Brazil, President Sheinbaum from Mexico, and President Zelensky from Ukraine are also going. Do you have confirmation if President Trump is meeting any other leaders on the sideline of the G7?
Yes.
How about the ULA engagement in ULA?
I can confirm there will be quite a few bilateral meetings between the president and other foreign leaders. The White House is still working very hard to finalize that schedule, and we will provide that for you as soon as we have it.
Great.
Thanks, Caroline. Just back to the China trade deal, can you talk about the status of the export controls that the U.S. imposed? Are those no longer being imposed?
We are fully complying with the Geneva Agreement. Go ahead. Sure.
Thanks, Caroline. One foreign question for you and one domestic. The foreign, the president, of course, has said he would lift sanctions on Syria. Is there an executive order coming along soon to go do that? And is the president planning to try to get involved in any kind of a peace agreement between Israel and Syria that would disengage those two?
To the best of my knowledge, the Treasury Department took action after the president made that announcement in Saudi Arabia.
Okay. And then on the domestic side, you were just asked about the First Amendment rights issues. In the president's comments yesterday, though, he just said protesters would be strongly dealt with. In your list before, you referred to insurrectionists, rioters, and protesters together. Obviously, they're quite different from your earlier answer. I'm struck by the fact that the president has not at any point said the most important thing here is to protect the First Amendment rights of peaceful protesters. So I'm wondering, where in his hierarchy of interests does he place that? Is the First Amendment protection the most important? Is stopping violence most important? Why is he not out saying all peaceful protesters will be protected?
I think two things can be important at the same time. And the president, as I just answered, supports the right of Americans to peacefully protest. He supports the First Amendment. But that is not the majority of the behavior that we have seen taking place in Los Angeles. We have seen mobs of violent rioters and agitators assaulting law enforcement officers, assaulting our federal immigration authorities. And we have seen, as I said, this goes back to what this administration is trying to do and accomplish, and that's enforcing law and order in our nation's communities. And it's removing public safety threats from communities in Los Angeles.
You're saying the majority have not been peaceful, the majority have been violent.
I just read for you the arrest numbers. We've arrested nearly 400 illegal aliens alone, just illegal aliens who have been arrested in these riots since June 6th, since they began.
Thousands of people on the streets.
Yeah, and we've had hundreds of people who have assaulted law enforcement officers. Are you saying that that's that's appropriate behavior?
No,
Are you
no,
saying
I'm not
that
saying
the
that at all.
president
I'm
shouldn't
just
take
trying
action?
to figure out.
The Democrat governor and the Democrat mayor of Los Angeles have failed their citizens. And the majority of Americans, the majority of Californians do not want to see law enforcement officers being assaulted in the streets. And thankfully, the president took action and stepped in to protect our federal law enforcement agents, to protect federal buildings, to protect the federal mission of deporting illegal criminals off of our streets. And that mission will continue every day as far as we're concerned. Thank you, guys.
And we'll continue to follow the top headlines from around the country and around the world here on Live Now from Fox. I'm Andy Mack. We're back after this. Welcome back into Live Now from Fox. I'm Andy Mack. Los Angeles DA Nathan Hochman and other officials detail charges against anti-ICE demonstrators in Southern California.
Thank you very much for coming today. I will be joined, my name is Nathan Hochman. I'm the District Attorney of Los Angeles County. You will hear after myself from Sheriff Robert Luna of the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department, and then Jim McDonald, the Chief of the Los Angeles Police Department. Before I announce the charges, the state charges that have been brought that are tied to these immigration protests, let me first put an overview about the charges. The complaints and the information you will hear about the charges today are not evidence. Evidence has to be presented in a court of law. An individual is presumed innocent until and unless they are proved guilty in that court of law beyond a reasonable doubt. So the discussion of the charges today is just that. It's a discussion of charges and not ultimately, or it does not ultimately constitute evidence of the crimes that will be presented in a court of law. So I first want to start out with a thank you. On behalf of the District Attorney's Office, I want to thank the hundreds of law enforcement officers from the LAPD, from the Los Angeles Sheriff's Department, from their related law enforcement agencies that have come to Los Angeles to help out in this situation. It is not a situation, certainly, that law enforcement intended to actually have happen. Both the District Attorney's Office, the LAPD, the LA Sheriff's Department, and local law enforcement do not participate in federal civil immigration enforcement. I want to make that crystal clear. We were not alerted ahead of time that this was going to happen. We were not involved in the participation of it or the staging of it. We are not involved at all with respect to federal civil immigration enforcement. What happened, though, is that though the law enforcement has done its absolute best to protect individuals who wanted legitimately to protest, to use their First Amendment rights of speech, to peacefully assemble. And when I say law enforcement has worked incredibly hard, they have worked overtime to make sure that people who want to engage in this legitimate protest have the opportunity to do so. The District Attorney's Office equally will fiercely protect people's rights to peacefully assemble and peacefully engage in First Amendment protected speech. However, when that speech crosses over from protected speech into illegal conduct, the people who engage in that illegal conduct will be prosecuted. They will first be arrested, they will be prosecuted, and they will be punished to the full extent of the law. We have said this repeatedly. We've said this as a warning to people who are thinking about conducting these illegal acts, pretending that they are engaged in protests, but at the moment they engage in the illegal acts, they are no longer legitimate First Amendment protesters. They are criminals, and they will be prosecuted as criminals. If people want to hurl insults, we will protect that. If people want to engage in crimes, we will prosecute them. So hurling bricks, hurling cinder blocks, hurling fireworks will not be tolerated in this county, now or ever. So when we talk about the cases that we are brought, I'm going to highlight 5 cases today that we have brought in order to, again, not to give an example of the types of cases that we are bringing, and as importantly, the types of potential criminal consequences the individuals who've engaged in this criminal activity will face. And in saying that, we will be having literally dozens and dozens of additional cases that will be brought to us from law enforcement to consider filing. In the weeks to come, we will look through all those cases. And by the way, as a quick aside, for any individual who's engaged in criminal conduct but did not get immediately arrested, let me provide some bad news for you. There's a tremendous amount of video out there through social media and otherwise. We will know who you are, who engaged in this conduct. We will track you down, we will arrest you, we will prosecute you, and we will punish you. So, for people who've already engaged in this illegal activity, we're coming for you. For people who are thinking that maybe this is a good idea to do, please take this as your warning. that if you engage in this conduct, please don't come to us afterwards and say, we didn't think anything was going to happen to us, because those prosecutions will occur. And again, before I go into the examples, let me give you one more overview. If you only saw the social media and the media reports of what's gone on over the last 5 days, you would think that Los Angeles is on the verge of war, that we are truly being attacked repeatedly over and over and over again, because that has been the media's message to both people in Los Angeles, to people in the state of California, to people in this nation, to people throughout this entire world, that somehow every second of every day there's another exploding firework on our street, that motorcycles are running into cops, that stores are being looted, that buildings are being vandalized and graffitied. But let me put this in perspective for you. There are 11 million people in this county, 4 million of which live in Los Angeles City. We estimate that there's probably thousands of people who've engaged in legitimate protests, let's say 4,000 people. That means that 99.9% of people who live in Los Angeles City or generally in Los Angeles County have not engaged in any protest at all. Now, amongst the people who've engaged in protests, we estimate there are hundreds of people, let's say up to maybe 400 to use rough percentages, who've engaged in this type of illegal activity. So what does that mean? That means that 99.99% of people who live in Los Angeles City or live in Los Angeles County have not committed any illegal acts in connection with this protest whatsoever. So let's put that as a context when we look at these images over and over again that the media wants to put out there to try and scare us all. And then understand what the resources that we can bring, that law enforcement can bring to this task. The Los Angeles Police Department has over 8,500 officers. Sheriff Luna has over 9,000 officers. The California Highway Patrol, the local law enforcement agencies that have all been enlisted and have been so generous in helping us out, bring additional thousands of officers if needed for any level of civil unrest that might occur. And that civil unrest has been on a downward trend over the last several days, but these law enforcement officers are absolutely ready for anything that comes their way. So let me describe these 5 cases. The first case involves an individual who's been charged. His name is Juan Rodriguez. He's from Gardena. He's been charged with 1 felony count of assault upon a peace officer, resisting arrest, and advocating violence against an officer that has caused injury. At 5 p.m. on June 8th, Mr. Rodriguez allegedly passed out commercial-grade fireworks to a group of protesters who lit them and threw these commercial-grade fireworks at police officers at the intersection of First Street and Los Angeles Street. He's also accused of throwing the fireworks himself at the officers. And one of these fireworks exploded and injured an officer from the exploding sparks. If convicted as charged, Mr. Rodriguez will be facing 6 years and 4 months in state prison. Second case, it involves Randy Paul Ruiz and Georgina Ravallero. Both have been charged with 2 felony counts of assault upon a peace officer. On June 8th, at approximately 3:40 p.m., police were holding a skirmish line at the corner of Temple and Alameda Streets when Mr. Ruiz allegedly drove his motorcycle into a line of officers. Minutes later, Ms. Ravallero is accused of driving another motorcycle into the officers, injuring one and knocking down several others. If convicted as charged, Ruiz and Ravallero each face up to 6 years and 4 months in state prison. Third case, Timmy Polk and Raven Mitchell. This case involves both of these individuals being charged with 1 felony count of second-degree commercial burglary and grand theft. On June 8th at about 10:15 p.m., Mitchell was double parked near a Nike store in the 600 block of South Broadway that was allegedly being looted by a group of people. Polk is accused of stealing multiple items from that store and getting into the car driven by Mitchell. They fled, but they were arrested a short time later. If convicted as charged, they each face up to 3 years in state prison. The next two cases are Los Angeles Sheriff's Department cases. Sheriff Luna will provide additional facts about these cases, but let me just give a quick overview of each one. Ulysses Sanchez. Ulysses Sanchez has been charged with one felony count of assault with a deadly weapon, possession of a firearm by a felon, and one misdemeanor count each of reckless driving and possession of a smoking device. On June 8th at 9:35 p.m., Mr. Sanchez engaged in reckless driving in his minivan in downtown Los Angeles. Many of you saw the video footage of this where he was driving in donuts and injuring individuals. Mr. Sanchez is a third striker. If convicted as charged, Mr. Sanchez faces up to 25 years to life in state prison. The fifth case is Christopher Gonzalez and Jocelyn Johnson. In this case, they have both been charged with one felony count of conspiracy to commit vandalism and two felony counts of vandalism as well. On June 9th at 6:30 p.m., Mr. Gonzalez is accused of vandalizing an apartment complex down here on the 500 block of South Broadway, and Mr. Gonzalez allegedly painted graffiti right here on the Hall of Justice. They each face 3 years and 8 months in state prison. I'm going to turn the microphone over to Sheriff Luna to go into greater detail. But again, I cannot commend enough the tireless work that law enforcement has brought to this task to try and keep us safe and still ensure that people who want to legitimately protest get that opportunity. Sheriff Luna.
Thank you, DA Hochman. Thank you all for covering this story. I do want to start off not only by thanking all of you for being here, but I do want to take just a quick second to thank the district attorney. The day after the protest started, he called me. He told me he was assigning a special prosecutor to deal with violence against our deputy sheriffs or any other related police officers. And I really appreciate that, because just for a quick second, if you could think of the mindset of our employees having to leave their families and coming to work, to know that they're going to be in the middle of some of that isolated chaos that you've seen. It is good to know that when they are being violently attacked, whether it's with rocks, bottles, Molotov cocktails, pyrotechnics, pepper spray, I could go on, that they know that the individuals that we're going to focus on them, and we have a district attorney who's going to bring forward charges. And just really quick, I received the same call from the U.S. attorney here in Los Angeles, and I think all of you saw something earlier today where he is doing the same thing with federal charges. So I just say that, and Mr. Hochman said it perfectly and articulated it very well. There's a big distinction between individuals that protest and demonstrate to violent, destructive, basically anarchists. I mean, just creating that chaos. What we're talking about are the individuals who don't care about the issue at hand, because we will facilitate all peaceful First Amendment activity. But when you have people that are out here to commit acts of violence against our deputy sheriffs or police officers, or they're destroying our city, we're going to stop it. You see it, it's frustrating, and as the days have gone on, arrests are climbing, and now the prosecutions are taking place. And just this warning, because if you didn't get caught the last couple of nights, there's a lot of evidence out there, and you're probably going to get detectives or others knocking on your door and arresting you and bringing you in for either committing all these acts that we've talked about. So just a little bit on some of the cases. On Saturday, during civil arrest in Paramount, a local gas station was burglarized, looted on Alondra Boulevard. After the Unlawful assembly concluded. Compton deputies responded to the gas station to secure the location and take the reports of the burglaries that had occurred. While at the location, an individual shouted at them and threw 2 full cans of beer in their direction. And I don't think it was to say thank you. It was for the opposite reason. The deputies ordered him to leave. However, he refused and threw a 3rd full can of beer at our deputies. Based on the suspect's assaultive actions, deputies used less lethal force, specifically a 40-millimeter baton launcher, striking the suspect. The deputies were able to immediately handcuff the suspect without any further incident. The suspect, 20-year-old Eduardo Cervantes, a resident of Linwood, was arrested for assault with a deadly weapon on a police officer. He was released on his own recognizance yesterday at the Compton court. Separately, 2 suspects arrested for felony vandalism here at the Hall of Justice. On Monday, deputies were driving in the 200 block of Temple Street near the Hall of Justice when they observed an act of vandalism in progress. They witnessed a 20-year-old Christopher Gonzalez Reese defacing the south wall of the Hall of Justice building, not with a spray can. He was literally standing there with a paint roller, a very long stick, and writing graffiti over an area measuring about 18 feet by 12. The suspect was using beige paint, and the content of the graffiti included profanity directed at a federal agency. The same suspect was previously identified as the same individual who was observed committing a similar act of vandalism on the south wall of a building located in the 500 block of North Broadway. In both occurrences, a second suspect identified as 40-year-old Jocelyn Johnson appeared to act as a lookout and was observed video recording the acts of vandalism. Following the second incident, deputies contacted both suspects and took them into custody. A search of their vehicle led to the discovery of large buckets of paint and a 10-foot extension pole believed to have been used in the commission of these crimes that were described. Both suspects were arrested and booked on felony vandalism charges. Just as I wrap up and before I turn it over to my partner, Chief Jim McDonald, I just want to reiterate, we will facilitate the peaceful protest, and thank God 99% of them are taking place in this one square mile area here in the city of Los Angeles, and then when you saw in Paramount and Compton on Saturday. We are going to do everything we can to protect our employees when they're being attacked. So if you come to demonstrate, that's great. If you come to throw things at us, attack our employees, you're going to get arrested, maybe not that day, but later, and you're going to get prosecuted. And not only may you serve significant time in jail, but there's going to be fines behind that. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Chief McDonald, and I'll be available for questions after he has completed his portion.
And coming up after the break, we'll take you out to hear the remainder of these remarks. Welcome back in to Live Now from Fox. I'm Andy Mack. Let's quickly take you out to hear the remainder of this event.
Thank you, Sheriff Luna, and thank you all. Good afternoon. And again, you'll hear some common themes here, certainly. I want to start by expressing my sincere gratitude to all of our officers and deputies on the lines for their professionalism and dedication. They've been asked to work long hours in dangerous and unpredictable conditions, and I'm grateful and proud of their resilience. I also want to thank our dedicated partners from local, state, and federal agencies for ongoing partnership and unwavering support during these challenging times. The Los Angeles Police Department recognizes and supports the right to peaceful protest, but when individuals choose to weaponize that right, by assaulting peace officers, endangering lives, or committing crimes under the cover of a crowd that is no longer a protest, that is a crime and it won't be tolerated. 3 individuals have been charged with felony assault on our officers, including the use of fireworks and motorcycles to cause harm. These were deliberate attacks, acts that injured officers who were simply doing their job out there to protect the public. Let's not forget our officers face uncertain and often dangerous situations every day, and their risk to their lives has been even greater over these last few days. I've watched Molotov cocktails and fireworks shot mortars being launched out of tubes at our officers. They're encountering routinely M-type fireworks and commercial-grade fireworks, which in the state of California are considered explosives, and they can kill. Our officers should never have to face targeted violence while standing on a line to protect others. I want to thank the district attorney for pursuing felony charges in these cases. It sends a strong and important message. If you assault a peace officer in this city or this county, you will be held accountable. Additionally, I'm also pleased that there are charges related to looting and vandalism, crimes that took advantage of the unrest to target businesses and city property. In one case, a retail store was burglarized and tens of thousands of dollars in merchandise were stolen. In another, graffiti was sprayed onto a historic public building while an accomplice stood watch. These crimes don't advance any cause or further any message. What they do is harm to our communities, our small businesses, and our civic institutions. The LAPD will continue to investigate all incidents thoroughly and work with our partners in the DA's office to bring every offender to justice. We remain committed to protecting First Amendment rights, restoring peace, and holding criminals accountable. I want to thank our officers, our partners in this community for their resilience and cooperation throughout this event. Thank you.
And before we start with questions, I also want to thank the 2 members of my office that have worked around the clock to bring these charges. Alva Lynn, who's our head deputy of our charge evaluation division, and Deputy District Attorney Michael Blake of our Crimes Against Police Officers Division. Now we'll take questions. Yes.
So earlier today, Major General Sherman said that National Guard members have detained some people. They've already done this and then immediately turned them over to law enforcement. Can you share a little bit about which law enforcement they went to, how many detained?
We're still working out a lot of the communication and coordination with the Army, who is in charge of the Marines as well. So I don't think whether Chief McDonald or I have heard specifically about that. I'm almost positive, but there is some guessing in this, that when he's talking about law enforcement, he's talking about federal law enforcement. Because one of their missions, from what has been described to us, is other than protecting federal facilities, they are protecting federal employees or federal law enforcement. So they're going to be going out together from our limited understanding thus far, and I think that's exactly what he's talking about.
Thank you.
I understand most of the people arrested are not facing the serious types of felonies that you're describing. They're probably going to be referred to the city attorney for less serious failures, of whatever those allegations would be. In recent history in Southern California, hundreds of people have been arrested on those allegations at protests, and then the city has made the decision not to prosecute any of them. And I'm curious if you're going to take a different position or what your thoughts are about that as it relates to the people arrested in the last few days.
So you are correct that there are certain crimes committed, misdemeanor crimes committed here in Los Angeles City that would be the jurisdiction of the city attorney's office. I have spoken to the city attorney, Heidi Feldstein Soto. she takes these crimes very seriously. I don't want to speak for her ahead of time as to the types of charges she's going to bring on these various violations. And you're right, they can, even misdemeanors can span a spectrum from failure to disperse, from violations of curfew, onto even more serious violent actions or actions involving theft. So I can tell you, having spoken to Ms. Felstein Soto, that she and her office will be taking these violations very seriously. I don't think we have a precedent that was set in prior protests. I will tell you from the district attorney's office, which didn't bring charges in connection with the prior protests, starting today, you've heard we are bringing these charges, felony charges. We consider the actions, particularly the actions against law enforcement, the actions against public safety, the actions defacing, as Chief McDonald said, historic buildings, extremely serious. In many ways, I've been, well, not in many ways, I've been a lifelong Angelino. I've been here over 60 years in this city and in this county. These people who want to go ahead and not protest and not engage in legitimate speech, but want to go ahead and commit crimes in our home, we're going to protect our home. We're going to make sure if someone wants to throw cinder blocks at our police officers, we're going to protect our police officers and hold those people accountable. They want to go ahead and write disgusting words all over our public buildings, we're going to go after them as well. They want to steal from our stores, we're going to hold them accountable for their actions. And that's the way I view it. That's the way the district attorney's office views it. If you want to come into our county, into our home, and commit crimes, you will be arrested, prosecuted, and punished.
Two questions, if I may. The first one being, all three of you have spoken in some regard about outside agitators or anarchists, I've heard. Obviously, you also respect the rights of peaceful protesters. I'm wondering if you can provide any evidence of maybe organization from anarchists. Have you been able to trace a certain group that's behind it? Obviously, you've highlighted 5 cases of men and women doing destruction, but is there any other evidence about anarchists or people that are coming in here with organized intentions?
I'm limited in what I can respond to that, only because there's ongoing cases, but I can assure you that all of us up here are looking to see if there is a conspiracy of some kind, organization. There is some evidence we've seen that I don't want to share at this time, and it's not because I don't want to talk to you about it. It's because we're focused on arresting those individuals involved and bringing the best cases forward. Some of them may be to the district attorney, but highly likely to the U.S. attorney, where we're working with some of our federal partners to look at that angle of exactly what you're asking for.
Then a quick follow-up for the chief. And this is coming from somebody who's been here for several days and have watched how your law enforcement officers have conducted themselves and have used less lethal rounds, from my perspective, only after being agitated by other people throwing things. However, there is a video now circulating online of less lethal methods being used on a woman, not quite a protester, standing very close to officers, being fired at with less lethal methods. Also a caveat that we do see these police officers give her multiple warnings, but I'm wondering if you can comment on the use of those methods at such a close distance as someone that did not seem to be posing much of a threat.
Yeah, I can't speak to that individual case because I'm not aware what the follow-up was. But each one of these we see generates an investigative follow-up. We will look into it thoroughly and then, look for all the video we possibly can out there, body-worn video on the officers, and then a video from the environment there, and put together as best we can what the circumstances were.
Perhaps then you could speak to people out there who may not understand that a warning's a warning, or that maybe officers would take that step.
Yeah, thank you for that. The bottom line is, once we give a dispersal order, it's because things have gotten out of hand and we're trying to restore order, and you are ordered to leave that area, and the officers are going to clear that area. And some of the tactics used involve less lethal munitions. And certainly, while they're way more accurate than they were in years past, certainly there's also times where they potentially hit a target that was not the intended target. So if you're in the environment and you're told to leave, please leave, because for your own safety and the safety of everyone around you.
Do you know what's going on in Boyle Heights? I just saw a video when I was leaving my office to get over here. There was a white car and then two silver cars. I think it was an SUV and a silver truck. Came up, caught off the white car, and two people hopped out. I mean, they looked, like they were, I couldn't tell if they were feds or local officers.
Right.
And then they detained that driver. Any idea what's...
Yeah, I've heard about that too. I haven't been able to find out more about it at this time. I know that Hollenbeck units were dispatched to that, so once we free up here, we'll figure out what was going on out there more.
Chief, and just to kind of follow up on that question, just trying to understand, does that mean that you guys have begun use of force reviews on some of these incidents?
Oh yeah, whenever anything happens of significance, we start looking at it right away, try and capture all the video we can, any other evidence we can right away.
We're going to take a couple more questions.
There's one particular question I wanted to ask. There was an arrest of Luz Aguilar. I believe she's an aide to one of our council members. I was wondering if there was any information regarding that arrest, if there were any charges that were posted for her and her sister, Antonia Aguilar.
Was it when you talked about? No. Yeah, no, I'll have to follow up with you to see what those, if there were charges filed or not on that one.
Maybe if the sheriff could just clarify what he had said earlier to the question about the National Guard now being given authorization to detain people. How would it work then, I suppose, and it sounded like from the previous answer you were saying they're only really there to detain those that are causing harm to federal officers, but I don't know, how would a handoff work to local law enforcement if the National Guard was to detain, say, a protester?
Let me clarify that. What's been communicated to me thus far, and we are asking for more specific communication from the Army, which the National Guard is falling under them now, along with the Marines, is that they've expressed to us that they have their mission is split up into 3 areas. That it is to protect federal functions, to protect federal facilities, and to protect federal personnel. And as far as I know, and again, we are all in meetings trying to increase our communication and coordination with them. So we're still asking for specific clarification. My understanding at this point is that they do not have the powers to arrest or detain. So if they are out in the field, they may be there, but they're working in conjunction with federal authorities. It could be ICE, Border Patrol. There's a whole host of acronym federal agencies that they're working with. But again, not knowing that specific incident, that's where communication and coordination is critical.
Sheriff, do you know, are the Marines here? I've been hearing since Sunday they've been on their way. And what are we at, Wednesday?
I would be guessing if I try to answer that. Again, I'm just going to leave it at this. We are doing everything we can. I know Chief McDonald and I and our staffs are doing everything we can to improve our communication with the Army, so we would know those specific questions. And they were just activated, I think, what was it, Sunday? So there's a lot going on behind the scenes. And first of all, I just tell you, I've never served in the military. I have nothing but respect for people in the military, whether they're soldiers in the National Guard or Marines. They are our soldiers. So we're doing our best to put them and ourselves, and primarily our community, in a position so that we succeed together moving forward. Because frankly, we're all in an extremely difficult situation right now that none of us have ever been involved in, including the military.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Assistant District Attorney.
And we'll continue to follow the top headlines from around the country and around the world here on Live Now from Fox. I'm Andy Mack. We're back after this.
disturbance. I know for a fact Marines have been trained in this many times, and they've been trained it for here in the U.S. and overseas, but it's just not part of the regular training curriculum. So what they did is I think part of it too is there's a lot of forces that have been brought in under this Task Force 51 to go into Los Angeles, and I'm seeing the normal sort of organizational issues of getting forces deployed to certain areas and set up and self-sustainable and all the other things that go with that. So I think there's kind of a deliberate process here of movement onward to wherever they got to go. And so they're staged right outside of LA, but they could come in rather quickly. One thing I would say is I haven't seen the protests spark up in such a way that there's an exigent need to put them in sooner. And I think that's something that has to be taken into consideration.
Separate demonstrations occurring at this hour, and they say to expect delays at some of these intersections and street corners here. You see there Temple and First Street, Temple and Aliso, and First Street from Main Street there. They say about 150 people on bicycles riding westbound. Haven't necessarily seen that throughout this. We've seen them on scooters and the like, but also LA County Sheriff saying this: to avoid protest area, that a demonstration is underway in downtown Los Angeles, saying to please avoid the area due to heavy traffic and potential delays, saying use alternate routes and stay updated via official sources. So Hal, I think this is kind of a bare bones question here. If you can help us, because I've been having trouble with distinguishing who these law enforcement entities are with respect to their uniforms, what they wear, the badges on their shoulders and the like here. So who are these? What jurisdiction are these individuals from?
I'm trying to make it out right now. I will tell you that LAPD is out there. LA County Sheriff's is out there. They are bringing in other jurisdictions under mutual aid out there as well. A lot of these other Guard, I believe.
The shield that they're holding says California National Guard.
Yeah, so they're National Guard, but there are, but some of them in the back are clearly not. They're probably local police department. I would mention this is part of an ongoing discussion that's been going back for 30 or 40 years, which is the militarization of law enforcement, where they have units that wear, you know, what look like military uniforms. They wear helmets. They've got body armor, everything. And from a distance, many times it's very difficult to see whether they are actually and I have heard it misreported at times that they thought there was military that was in direct contact or doing stuff with the protesters. In actuality, it was law enforcement that was dressed up in what appears to be, you know, military or paramilitary uniforms that are part of their usually special enforcement or their